This is Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
I'm the only lawyer ever to obtain a court ruling that a president of the United States committed a crime.
For truth. For competition.
As a young lawyer, I helped break up AT&T. That's why you have all your cell phones today.
For sovereignty. For the Republic.
I'm the guy who at Judicial Watch, which I founded, uncovered the Chinagate scandal. Millions of dollars going to the Clinton campaign, corrupting our political system.
For the privacy of citizens.
And I'm the only guy to have enjoined the National Security Agency from mass surveillance on hundreds of millions of Americans.
Tearing it up.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
Bringing it back.
We're going to take this country apart and put it back together again in the way envisioned by our founding fathers.
It's not just talk.
We're not just regurgitating news stories. Larry Klayman, Special Prosecutor, is making the news.
And now, here's Larry.
Welcome to this week's edition of Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. By the way, I urge you to go back and listen to some of our prior editions, episodes, at radioamerica.com or freedomwatchusa.org, because they're instructive. And each week, we're coming up with new information, new news. We don't just regurgitate the news, as we've said. We make the news. And you can also see our YouTubes, and we're on Roku and Amazon Fire. We're out there doing a lot of media every week in addition to the lawsuits and investigations, because we really need to educate the American people about what goes on in Washington, D.C., in the United States, and also around the world. I've had a lot of experience. I've been a lawyer for 40 years. I was an international lawyer before I became a crime fighter. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, see what we're doing, sign up, and contribute to our cause. But I want to talk first this week about what's been going on with North Korea, because I'm a guy that lived through the Vietnam War. Now, I never was drafted, because the year I was coming out of Duke University, President Nixon ended the draft. I would have gone. I probably would have stupidly gone, because at that point the war was lost. It was a mistake to begin with, and it started based upon a huge lie. And this is instructive about what's going on right now with North Korea. I'm not saying that President Trump's lying, not at all, but let me tell you what I think the strategy is here without lying. President Lyndon Johnson, of course, was the president during the Vietnam Wars after John F. Kennedy tragically died. I don't believe that Kennedy would have gotten us into Vietnam the way Johnson did. But Johnson used the pretext of an attack on U.S. boats, vessels, Navy vessels, at the Gulf of Tonkin to get into the war in a big way, to start sending hundreds of thousands of U.S. fighting men and women to die, and 55,000 people plus died in the Vietnam War. When you go to Washington, I urge you to go to the Vietnam War Memorial. It's perhaps the most moving memorial in Washington. It's kind of like a mass grave, and it oversees the Washington Monument and the Mall and the Capitol, particularly at night. It's very, very impressive, but it's also very sad. We lost a lot of life. But Johnson lied about the attack at the Gulf of Tonkin to get the United States into the war in a major way, and he went to Congress and got the approval to do that, because this was a war, and it was called the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution. Now, in the last week, we've learned from leaks. Sometimes leaks can be good. They shouldn't occur if you have an honest government, but if you don't have an honest government, leaks can actually be favorable. We learned that the North Vietnamese, I'm getting a Freudian slip here, that the North Koreans actually have miniaturized warheads that they can put on intercontinental ballistic missiles, which they have successfully tested at least 2 times. Now, that's very dangerous, not because of North Korea alone, but also because they are partners with Iran. Iran likely has the same technology at this point in time. Now, that's important, because why is it, for all these years, through the George W. Bush administration, through the administration before that of Bill Clinton, through the administration of Barack Obama, particularly Obama, because this is when these great strides in technology occurred in North Korea, weren't we told about that? It obvious is that it was covered up. It was hidden because Obama didn't want to have to do anything about North Korea. He wanted to pass that on to his successor. That's President Trump. He inherited a disaster with regard to North Korea and, of course, by analogy, Iran. Now, but you got to ask yourself another question, is that you have some prominent Republicans that were on the House Armed Services Committee during this time. They should have been getting intelligence briefings. And unless our intelligence agencies failed yet again, as they did in the days leading up to the first Iraq War with Saddam Hussein. I say the first because there's still going on, really, with ISIS and everything else. Why isn't it that that information was either available to the Armed Services Committee or the President of the United States, or more likely, covered up? And who, of course, is the big mouth in the Armed Services Committee? John McCain, a guy who likes all wars, never had a war he didn't like, wants to fight continuously. You've got Lindsey Graham, his partner, his Bobbsey twin, his significant other, in effect. And you've got other people on there. So why is it the American people weren't advised of this? Why is it all of a sudden we find out that they can miniaturize nuclear weapons? You know, the intelligence agencies are really good at spying on hundreds of millions of Americans, including President Trump when he was a businessman, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, other justices, 156 judges, yours truly, and anybody that challenges or is seen as a threat to the Washington establishment. Yet they spend their time doing that. But if you take it on face value, they didn't learn until just a few weeks ago that North Korea could miniaturize atomic weapons and put them on intercontinental ballistic missiles, which now they say can hit not just Los Angeles, not just San Francisco, not just Hawaii, but Chicago, Washington, D.C., and New York City as well. In fact, the entire country. And if just one gets through, that's serious, because the radiation would kill millions of people and perhaps knock out our power grid. We'd go back into the Stone Age. There'd be massive death. This is what we're facing. So along comes President Trump, and he talks in a very, very tough way to North Korea. He threatens them. He talks about fire and fury taking them out. And then he has a press conference the next day. He's on vacation at his facility, his golf facility, and whatever else he has in New Jersey. And he talks about, well, maybe I wasn't strong enough. And then that's in face of sanctions that came out of the UN, which are worthless. Economic sanctions never do anything. They've only worked once with South Africa because the whole world cut them off completely from trade because of that abhorrent regime, apartheid. But he's provoking an attack by North Korea. Now, I say, when you get up on the dance floor, either you dance or sit down. The most prudent course of action would be to have simply waged a strike under cover of darkness, without warning, and taking out the North Korean military facilities, including the nuclear facilities, and taking out the North Korean leadership. That's what Israel did in Libya. That's what Israel did in Syria a number of years ago, and they succeeded, at least when they had a prime minister who had some guts. Netanyahu's lost his guts, which is probably why he's being removed right now as we speak. But the reality here is that provoking without actually doing something is counterproductive. And I believe that President Trump and his advisors made a mistake. But what they're trying to do, and in the last few days, Korea has threatened to send 4 missiles to the waters of Guam. Guam is a U.S. territory. Guam belongs to the United States. We have over 200,000 American citizens and permanent residents and military personnel on that island in the South Pacific. I think what President Trump's doing, if there's any method to this madness, is to create a Gulf of Tonkin situation where North Korea attacks us so we then can take them out. But the problem with that is that by waiting this amount of time, North Korea has contingency plans. They can do more. They can do real harm to South Korea. They can launch nuclear missiles on Japan, on other neighbors in the area, our allies in the South Pacific. And to me, none of it seems to make much sense. And I'm somebody who's been very supportive of President Trump, but I don't know what kind of advice he's getting, or maybe he's not following advice. But if you're going to take the North Korean regime out, which I believe has to be done at this point, you do it and you don't talk about it and you don't give them advance warning. And that's the problem that I have. And it's why many people in this country, and I lived through the Cuban Missile Crisis, and I'll tell you something, I had nightmares as a young kid for a very long time. My mother, may her soul rest in peace, I love my mother, but she told us that we were all going to die, and everybody believed that at the time. When I was in elementary school, I was hiding under the desk because that's what we were supposed to do if there was a nuclear attack. Obviously, desks weren't going to prevent us from being killed. And I remember sitting in my parents' bedroom watching a football game, really scared, when an announcement came on that Premier Khrushchev of the Soviet Union was pulling out the missiles from Cuba. We didn't know, of course, at the time that wasn't a great victory for Kennedy, that in fact he traded off our missiles in Turkey that were pointed at the Soviet Union, and he also promised that he would never ever, nor would any American president, seek to remove Fidel Castro. Frankly, it wasn't a great deal, but at least avoided a nuclear holocaust at that time. But we're in that situation now, and if you look at the cable news networks, there are many people around this country who are frightened to death that we're under the threat of a nuclear war. And I just urge President Trump to take the old adage, when you get up on the dance floor, either you dance or sit down. Do what it is you intend to do, or frankly, shut up. Because what's now happening is that you're provoking North Korea. Now, if you want to provoke North Korea, and maybe that'll be a pretext to get a resolution like the Gulf of Tonkin from Congress to take Korea out, it's probably already too late, because they already know what they're going to do, and they know how they're going to either nuke us or nuke our allies or create havoc generally throughout the world. So that's my opening statement today. And as somebody who lived through the Vietnam War experience, I got to tell you, it's eerie in terms of what's going on again. And we need to be more responsible in the way we do things. We in the United States, we've been focused on this Russia collusion investigation. There are much more important things to worry about right now, and that's North Korea, and that's Iran, and that's ISIS and terrorism. And that's the tragedy of what's been going on in Washington, D.C. I mean, they are a bunch of fools. I remember Woody Allen's movie, Everything You Wanted to Know About Sex, but We're Afraid to Ask, when the king would say, bring me the court jester, bring me the fool. And what we've got in Washington, D.C. today, particularly in Congress and in the intel agencies, are malevolent, evil fools who are lying to the American people. And that's why what we do at Judicial Freedom Watch, that's my former group, is so important. We're going to talk about that later. I'll be right back.
Dangerous.
You don't care. He uses the court and the law.
Lethal.
This is bad.
Special Prosecutor.
Very bad.
Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
I ended the last segment with a Freudian slip, reminding me that I was the founder of Judicial Watch. I actually conceived of it, and I'm very proud of what I did for 10 years before I went off to try to run for the U.S. Senate in Florida. But, it's interesting, and this kind of goes into this segue right now, because what I'm doing at Freedom Watch is a lot different than what Judicial Watch is currently doing. Now, they're doing a lot of Freedom of Information Act cases, and this tells you something about where we are today. We're bringing hard-hitting cases, and I'm going to talk about that later, cases that actually serve as if we're the private justice department, where we seek remedies, where we seek damages, where we seek injunctions. We're not just getting documents. Documents are important. I'm not dismissing that. But because they're seeking documents, these judges have slow-rolled cases. And we know a lot about what's been going on lately. And I'm going to talk about that in depth. But right now, and here's the thing, Freedom Watch and Larry Klayman have brought cases against James Comey. They brought cases against James Clapper, the corrupt ex-director of national intelligence under Obama, the corrupt director of the CIA, John Brennan, under Obama, and others who have subverted our country. And this gets back to the intelligence aspect of it, is that they haven't really been doing their job. The CIA has apparently either blown it yet again, or as I said in the first segment, there's been a cover-up of what North Korea can do in terms of military, in terms of technology, in terms of hitting us with a nuclear miniaturized warhead. And that means now. It's actually upon us. So these cases that we bring that seek relief, that seek to get justice, are very important, because our Justice Department has been neutered under Jeff Sessions. They're doing little to nothing. We talked about that last week. And, of course, our Congress has ground to a halt. They're more interested in going off on vacation in August than passing some kind of renewal to the Affordable Care Act after having invalidated Obamacare, which they promised to do for 7 years. So that's the importance of this. But to talk about the problems that President Trump has right now, we saw this week with a reported raid on the home of Paul Manafort, an FBI raid under cover of darkness with a warrant, really an excessive use of force, really something that you didn't see even during the years of the independent counsel investigation, Ken Starr, with Bill and Hillary Clinton. At the same time that the president is sending subliminal messages through his lawyer praising Mueller. I mean, you got to wonder, why is he doing that when he has attacked Mueller in the past? He correctly attacked Mueller. Mueller has a conflict of interest. Mueller's out to get him with the Democrat hacks prosecutors that he hired, 16 of them, at great government expense. This tells people like myself and others who are trying to go to bat and get justice here and make sure that Mueller is gone in some way, and Comey is held to account for what he did in triggering this special counsel investigation. It basically says, you know, why are we out there running interference for the president? I'm not doing that intentionally, by the way. I haven't been instructed to do that, and I'm not running interference, but I'm trying to bring about justice. And these mixed messages, like he's saying on North Korea, like he's saying now with Mueller, because it was reported his lawyers are sending messages for him that Mueller's doing a great job. It destroys confidence in the president. Either you take a position or you don't, but you can't do both sides of the fence. You can't talk out of both sides of your mouth. And as much as I love President Trump and want him to succeed, I urge him to be consistent, to not just play the art of the deal and bluff, but to be the direct person he is. And Mueller is a real threat. Now, let me tell you what Mueller has in mind. And who is Paul Manafort? Paul Manafort is his former campaign chairman. Paul Manafort is the former partner of Roger Stone, of Paul Manafort, Stone, and Kelly. Manafort, Stone, and Kelly was a consulting firm that helped elect Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush. They tried to elect Jack Kemp at some point, some of them anyway, not all of them. But Manafort is very close to the people in and around Trump who got Trump elected, the people that figured out the plan to do that along with Trump. And they're trying to flip Manafort. They're looking for anything they can to get Manafort to turn state's evidence, to turn against Trump and the people around him. And this is highly dangerous. And the people that are most in harm's way are Roger Stone. You've got General Flynn. You've got the press secretary, Michael Caputo, who works with Stone and works with others, and Jared Kushner and others like that. Now, they'll never burn the higher-ups. They'll never burn Trump himself. They may try to impeach him, but they won't get him. And that's the problem here with just doing FOIA requests. You have to get in there. You have to file lawsuits. You have to try to do mete out justice yourself, because obviously our Justice Department is out to lunch. I'll be right back.
And now, 4 words that make corrupt politicians make wee-wee in their little pants.
Transparency and the rule of law will be the touchstones of this presidency.
But we have to pass the bill so that you can find out what is in it.
Special Prosecutor Larry Klayman.
Be the one who makes our country great again. Go to freedomwatchusa.org and donate.
Now, why is it that Freedom Watch is so important? And I urge you to go to freedomwatchusa.org and contribute to our cause. We need your financial support. We need your other support. We need your prayers. freedomwatchusa.org. Sign up for our free communication. Sign up for YouTube's. Give us your email address. We'll keep you apprised of what's going on. We want you to be part of our team. We are the second American Revolution. We are the mouse that roared. We are the new colonialists. We hopefully are the new founding fathers that are going to restore this nation to greatness. But let me tell you why we do what we do, and why my 40 years of litigation experience, and why my fearless efforts, if I can toot my own horn, because I don't worry about judges. I don't worry about government officials. I do what I think's right, and someone's got to do it. And frankly, there are very few people out there that'll just frankly let it rip and not worry about the consequence, because you can't worry about it. If people think you're scared of them, it's like someone walking down the street and seeing a rabid dog. If that rabid dog thinks that you're scared of him, he's going to attack you. Well, the government's very powerful, and they do try to take people out. They've tried to take me out. But I'm going to go as long as I can, but I need your support to do it. And the people around me need your support. We need to hire more people. We need to push harder because we don't have a Justice Department today. And we don't have a judiciary, which frankly is by and large very honest. We have most of them are Obama appointees or Clinton appointees. They've slow-rolled cases, and they have subverted justice. Now, there are some good judges like Judge Richard Leon, like Judge Royce Lamberth. A friend of mine is Judge Stanley Sporkin of years back, Judge Sanders Sauls, who administered to the election challenge of Al Gore in 2000. There are some really good judges, but you know what? They're few and far between because we don't get the best and brightest on the bench, regrettably. Maybe the lure of private practice and all the money, maybe other things interest them, but we don't get the best and brightest. And I've talked on a previous show of how we can come up with a better way of selecting judges. But let me tell you something. There's been a lot said this week about a court ruling by Judge Mehta that allows for another search of Hillary Clinton's emails at the State Department. My former group, Judicial Watch, got that ruling. It's a Freedom of Information Act case. And regrettably, I mean, as much hype as this got, let me tell you the truth. Let me tell you the reality. And it's why Freedom of Information Act cases are good, but these judges have slow-rolled cases, and they're not bringing about justice. Judge Mehta sat on this for several years. Other judges in that courthouse, Judge Boasberg, who has a case I'm going to talk about it, Judge Cooper, Judge Jackson, Judge Brown, Judge Catelli, others, leftist judges, slow-rolled Freedom of Information Act cases, Judge Sullivan even though he allowed for some discovery with regard to Benghazi and other issues. They have slowed these cases down, and the reason they did it, in my opinion, is because they didn't want the information to come out while it appeared that Hillary Clinton was going to run for president and hopefully be elected. So you can crow about these rulings and say, oh, this is a great ruling, and we can get back into Hillary Clinton. But with Jeff Sessions as the Attorney General, who's scared of his shadow, scared of the retaliation, you're never going to see a prosecution of Hillary Clinton. Give that idea up, nor the people in and around Hillary Clinton. And these judges, knowing that the Democrats lost the last elections, that they're no longer in control of the presidency, they're no longer in control of the Senate, and they hadn't been in control of the House, they feel as if maybe somehow they can look somewhat honest right now. But you know what? They're not really very honest. And the fact that these cases went along for all these years without forcing the State Department in this case, their Benghazi documents, and that's important even for what I'm doing, and I'll tell you about that in a bit, they slow-rolled it on purpose. Now, we have a case right now, and I want to talk about that because this is instructive about the way the system works. That's why, and rather doesn't work, that's why we have this radio show, because I want you to understand that the situation in Washington when it comes to corruption, intellectual dishonesty, and actual dishonesty is actually even worse than President Trump talks about, because he hasn't been in the trenches like I have for 40 years dealing with these people. And of course, it started when I was a Justice Department lawyer myself, and I saw people being prosecuted who were on the wrong side of the street, and those who had connections weren't. And that's why ultimately I started Judicial Watch, to create the People's Justice Department. And that's why I now have Freedom Watch doing what Judicial Watch used to do, the heavy lifting, the hard-hitting cases. But I had a case, we filed recently a Freedom of Information Act a case, a request. It turned into a lawsuit. And I still do that because we need to get the documentation. And it was assigned to Judge Boasberg, Judge Richard Boasberg. And he is the judge who refused to release the photograph of the dead body of Osama bin Laden when Judicial Watch and I asked for that, claiming that it would offend Muslims throughout the world. I mean, that's a joke. I mean, it's not even a joke. It's a bad joke, because there is no privacy rights for a dead person, number one. There's no privacy rights for a terrorist, for their families that were participating in the terrorism and furthering it. And there is no exemption to produce documents based upon offending the Muslim world. Now, this is Judge Boasberg. So my case that I just filed against Comey to get his memos, the memos that he took from the Justice Department, he claims, from the FBI, which is part of the Justice Department, and gave them through a lawyer at Columbia University to New York Times, which triggered Special Counsel Mueller. This case was assigned to Judge Boasberg. Now, others also filed cases. My former group, Judicial Watch, filed a similar case. CNN, believe it or not, filed a lawsuit. They want to see the memos. And Gannett Publishing, which is a large organization, a large media syndicated organization as well. I agreed, along with these other litigants, because these were all separate cases, to be consolidated with one judge. And it didn't really matter who was going to get consolidated with. It was consolidated with Judge Boasberg because the other judges were just as bad, ultra-leftist judges who also slowed-rolled cases. So I figured, what the heck, let it be consolidated. Let's move it forward. At least I'll be in court with my former colleagues, and they're not quite as tough on the government as I am. So I figured maybe I could even help them too. But here's what happened. We have a conference call yesterday with the government lawyer, an individual by the name of Carol Federici. She's in the Federal Programs Branch of the Justice Department. This is the branch that defends FOIA requests and frequently defends government defendants who have been accused of wrongdoing. I have them in a number of cases. I've written a WorldNet Daily column that's going to be up at freedomwatchusa.org tonight. You can find it at WND.com, which talks about the Federal Programs Branch and why Attorney General Sessions should be cleaning house there and perhaps transferring them to the threatened island of Guam. I think that's what they may deserve. Of course, you can't fire government employees. It's virtually impossible. So you have to transfer them out. So let's send them to the DOJ field office, the Justice Department field office on Guam. That's where they deserve to be, tongue-in-cheek. Because these guys have subverted justice now for a very long time. Just a year and a half ago, Judge Andrew Hanen in Texas, in that famous case that invalidated Obama's executive order on immigration, granting amnesty to 500 illegal aliens, they lied to Judge Hanen. They said that, in fact, Obama was not implementing this illegal executive order when, in fact, he was. Hanen caught them, and sanctioned them for lying and ordered everybody in that branch to take a course on professional ethics. Well, Carol Federici comes from that branch of the Justice Department. So when we started that conference call yesterday, I took the lead, and I said, Ms. Federici, how long is it going to be till you produce these documents? And she says, well, we're not producing the documents. We have exemptions. I said, what exemptions are they? Oh, investigatory privilege with Robert Mueller, because he's got a special counsel investigation going before a grand jury. We now know that he's in panel 2 grand juries, one in the District of Columbia and one in Virginia. One in District of Columbia because if he indicts anyone, he's going to get a favorable jury. It's a very democratic city that hates Trump. But she said, I'm not producing anything. I said, well, why do you need all that time? Well, it's vacation period. I said, Justice Department has 7,000 lawyers. You're telling me you can't accelerate this because we want to get a court decision. And besides, how many documents do you have with regard to the Comey memos? And in fact, the CNN lawyer asked the same thing. Well, 45 pages. I said, you need months to work on that and to produce a log of why you claim they're exempt and can't be produced. I said, have you ever seen these documents? No, I haven't seen them. I said, there must be copies. They can't all be with Special Counsel Mueller. I said, do you know whether there are or not? She says, I don't know that either. And I then said to her, and I lectured her because I was hoping to force her to take a strong stand with her clients, because the Federal Programs Branch of DOJ usually just takes whatever the clients say and furthers their lie to judges. This has been going on for years. I've gone up against one of the lawyers, James Gilligan, all the time. It's a little bit like Perry Mason. I always wind up against the same person. I usually win in the end, but sometimes it takes a very long time. I go up against someone by the name of Marsha Berman. I go in front of someone by the name of Elizabeth Shapiro. All of these people, and I hate to say it, are paid liars. Okay, whoever's in office, they're yes men. They'll lie for them. That's their job. They just want to go home at 5 o'clock, and they want to have a good life and get their government pension. So, hey, I'm not going to make waves. I don't want to be transferred to the island of Guam. So I'll do whatever I'm told from the higher up. So I said to Ms. Federici, I said, why don't you go to the Attorney General Sessions and ask him to waive any of your exemptions? Because, frankly, the Trump administration should want these memoranda of Comey out. This is what triggered the special counsel. Should want to get them out publicly. She says, oh, I'm not doing that. So then I began to lecture her, and I said, you know, your section has been sanctioned for lying in Texas. Your sanction over the years does not tell the truth. I said, I hope, Ms. Federici, that you're different. I hope that you'll actually exercise some control. And you tell me that you don't even know what's in these memoranda, that you've never checked. You know, you just can't come forward and lie on behalf of your clients. And at that point, interestingly enough, Polar Finitas, who I raised almost from birth, I'm joking a little bit, he started with me as a private lawyer 2 years out of law school in my law firm. And then he became one of the lawyers at Judicial Watch. And then he became a director of Judicial Watch. He butts in and he says, he cuts me off and says, oh, this isn't what I want to do. This isn't productive, Larry. Stop. And I said, Paul, butt out of this. I said, you know, we've got to try to resolve this thing. And then he says, oh, well, I've got to go somewhere. I got something to do. Well, I mean, this is ironic, is that my former group that's crowing about getting documents is throwing a monkey wrench into getting the Comey memos. And it's probably because I've had issues with them, you know, over the last several years with the directors, Tom Fitton, with Polar Finitas, with Chris Farrell. I got a judgment against them for maliciously defaming me a few years ago. But, you know, if you're really into justice, you know, let me do my thing and see if we can get these documents. Because if it has to go through Judge Boasberg, if we have to have him make an order, ordering them to be released soon, you can forget that. Because Boasberg is a leftist, he's a Democrat, as are many of the judges in that courthouse, and they are going to be very protective of the whole Comey situation, of the special counsel situation. So it's about time that Attorney General Jeff Sessions and his deputy, Rod Rosenstein, who I also suggested to Ms. Federici go to try to get these exemptions waived so the American people could see these 45 pages. It's important that it gets out. We have to try to do that and get the Justice Department to do the right thing and not rely on Judge Boasberg, who has a history, frankly, of participating in cover-ups of anything that involves the Democratic Party. And I hate to say that, but it's true. And there are other judges in that courthouse that do that as well. In fact, 95% of the judges are leftist Clinton and Obama appointees. And that's why Judicial Watch, crowing about this ruling by Judge Mehta, that they're going to get to do a search of the State Department's files on Benghazi. I hope it happens. But this happened a couple years late. It happened after Hillary Clinton is no longer running for the presidency and after she's a dead duck in the water of ever running again. And don't count on a prosecution. And this tells you why you need hard-hitting lawsuits, why you need to try to bring about justice yourself, why I need your support at freedomwatchusa.org. Because we are your Justice Department. It's one thing to get documents, and that's good, but we have to bring lawsuits to bring about justice and not wait for the government to do it. Because under Sessions and under Rosenstein, you can forget it. We'll be right back.
Before he was a trial lawyer, he sliced him and diced him.
People used to ask me, Larry, what caused you to start Judicial Watch and now Freedom Watch, given the powerful forces in this country that put you at risk?
In a meat packing plant.
I'm the son of meat packers in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I know how to slice and dice.
A very special prosecutor, Larry Klayman.
If you'd like to support Freedom Watch and this radio show, go to freedomwatchusa.org.
Now let me give an example of why Freedom Watch is different than the current Judicial Watch by and large. They have some lawsuits where they're seeking remedies, but very few. But I have a case that's on the horizon. Watch what we're doing. A Texas Ranger trying to arrest drug dealers running across the border in southern Texas was shot by Mexican agents from across the border from Mexico. Unbelievable. Mexico committed an act of violence against the United States. Our client, I'm not going to release the names yet, we will when we file the case, was a Texas Ranger. He was hit in the private parts. He was hit in other parts of his body. He was almost killed. And this was a Mexican state that carried this out. And probably it was a reaction to what former President Vicente Fox was saying about Trump. He used the F word with Trump. He called him Hitler. He called him everything else. And these people reacted. So this is a very important case. We're going to be bringing this in the Southern District of Texas in federal court against the Mexican government and the Mexican state. They're federated like we are. They have various states. And this is something that we're doing at Freedom Watch because obviously the government's doing nothing in that regard. The Justice Department as well. Texas Ranger attack shot by a Mexican so-called policeman from across the border. Now, let's talk about another case. I've got other cases in Texas against Black Lives Matter, against Nation of Islam, Louis Farrakhan, against Al Sharpton, and against others, for inciting violence. Over a year ago, there was a massacre in Dallas, Texas, and we're bringing lawsuits to bring about justice, wrongful death lawsuits, assault lawsuits, and others. Nobody else will do it. Everybody's scared of Farrakhan. He's threatened to kill white people. He's threatened to kill Jews. He's threatened to kill Christians. He has incited violence. And the individual who actually committed the murders and assaults in Dallas was a disciple of Louis Farrakhan. So those cases are ongoing. I've got another case against the government of Iran, against the Taliban, against former President Karzai, one of the most corrupt people ever to rule any country, and others in federal court in Washington, D.C. We're seeking justice. We're seeking large damages. We're seeking to bring the Iranian regime accountable, as our American government, again, does nothing in court. They just talk a good game, blowhard bluster, but nothing. It's Freedom Watch that's doing that. And, of course, I have the NSA case where we filed a lawsuit against James Comey, James Clapper, former DNI, John Brennan, former CIA director, Admiral Mike Rogers, who runs the NSA. He did it also under Obama. He's corrupted as well. The current CIA director, Mike Pompeo, who believes that it's okay to survey whoever you want, even if there's no probable cause, and others. That's Judicial Watch. Another Freudian slip. That's the way Judicial Watch used to be. That's now Freedom Watch. And I want you to go to freedomwatchusa.org to see what we're doing. Although for tactical reasons I recently withdrew the case, we will be having cases against Berkeley for the riots. We represent a very fine gay woman by the name of Kiara Robles, who was attacked when Milo, the journalist at Breitbart, sought to speak there. And that case is against not just the attackers that were participated in by Antifa, a very radical anarchist leftist group that wants to destroy this country, but also the University of California at Berkeley. We're pursuing that. So these are the kinds of things that we do at Freedom Watch. Go to freedomwatchusa.org. These are just a few of our cases. The Freedom of Information Act cases are important, but they simply reveal documents. And because of the leftist bent of the court in the District of Columbia, those documents frequently don't come out for years. And I doubt that even the search that's going to be conducted at the State Department is going to yield much that Judicial Watch has been crowing about this week. Because we know, for instance, just recently, the FBI lied when they were to release information on that tarmac meeting with Bill Clinton and Loretta Lynch, delayed everything for years. And I suspect that this State Department, which in the deep state level below Secretary Tillerson, is still loyal to the Obama crowd, still loyal to the Clinton crowd, and they will lie. Very few documents will come out. And that's why we need these hard-hitting cases. That's why we need your support. We need to be what our Justice Department is not. We are your Justice Department. Special Prosecutor with Larry Klayman. It's not just a radio show. We actually do stuff. So go to freedomwatchusa.org, freedomwatchusa.org. Please contribute to our cause. We need you in our Gideon's Army. We will restore the vision of our founding fathers. God save America. God bless America. And may you have a great week. Thank you for listening.